Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and today we're going to talk about how you're going to fail as a photographer. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey, thanks for joining me today. I am Raymond, as always, your host of the Beginner Photography Podcast. And today, there's no interview with a guest today. Today, I really wanted to take time and talk about something that keeps coming up over and over again. And I know that because, for one, I think it's this time of year with fall happening and photographers typically, quote unquote, busy. Like, this is our busy season, at least here in the US. And knowing what I went through when I first started, and that's like this feeling of, oh man, how come all these other photographers are working right now and I'm not? There's this inadequacy that you may feel, and as a photographer that can be hard, because then you think to yourself, like, you get into photography because you like to create something, you like to tell a story, and it's personal to you. So if you're not getting hired, you kind of take that as like a direct response to how people like your work, and that's just not true. So today, that's what it is that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about you failing as a photographer. So first of all, it's true. You're going to fail as a photographer. In fact, everybody fails as a photographer. This isn't like a harp at you. It's not saying that you're not good enough to be a photographer. It's that whatever it is that you try to do, you're going to fail at it. And that's okay. That's totally okay. In fact, when I first started photography, I thought, maybe, well, first, I've failed my entire life, okay? And failure is kind of a bad word. It's more of, I've learned a different way of doing things, okay? So when I was in high school, I thought I knew what it was that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to be a cinematographer. I knew that I wanted to be behind the camera and place lighting for movies and control camera movements and I just saw that one picture in my head of somebody that they would have taken of me, like behind the camera, looking through it and like pointing at an actor or something, right? It's just like this epic. I knew that I wanted it so bad. And then I put all my chips in. I didn't go to a traditional 4-year university. I knew that I wanted to be a cinematographer so bad that what I did was I went to a school that wasn't going to teach me the BS. I went to a school that wasn't going to take, and I'm not saying that like English and math and stuff is BS, but like for wanting to focus all of my attention on one subject, cinematography, I didn't want to waste my time with all that other stuff, or in my eyes, garbage. So I went to a school that was going to teach me only that. And when I got there, it was everything that I ever imagined, man. It was so much fun. It was working with like this close group of people who I was in class with. They became my friends. We worked on fun projects together. The whole process of pre-production and planning and bringing everything together, renting equipment, bringing it all to set, getting a location. Finally, like the day of, like, yeah, here we are, we have actors, like we're going through this, setting up all the lighting, all the challenges that you go through. Like, oh, well, this building, it can't handle multiple 2Ks, so I'm gonna have to use a 1K here, and then maybe a Kino, and then bring in a silk through the window to diffuse the light. All these things, these challenges every day. It was wonderful. It was truly, I loved it. I loved it. And then when I got out into the real world, like working as a camera assistant and shortly as a cinematographer as well, I realized, like, man, this is not it. This is not what I had signed up for. Now, at the time, sure, maybe I could have spent more time in the industry cultivating friends who eventually wanted to, open up a production studio, and we could have went that route, sure. But for the time being, it just didn't make sense, and I thought, like, I kind of don't like this as much as I thought that I would have. there's so many more people that I have to answer to. And not that I have like a problem with authority, but it's like these should be simple creative decisions, and now I'm being undermined because, well, we have to, feature this or do that thing. Things just weren't being ran efficiently, and I didn't like that I had the control removed from me. Maybe I've shared this story before, but my point is that once I realized, you know what, like being a working cinematographer is not what I want to do. Making fun videos, that's what I want to do. Not being like a working union cinematographer. That was not in the cards for me. So then I had to ask myself, like, well, what do I do? Like, I just spent a lot of time and even more money in school focusing on this one subject, and now I'm just gonna throw it all away to do something else, because at the same time is when I had purchased a DSLR so that I could keep my skills sharp. Obviously with shooting movies, it's a lot harder to keep practicing. You need people in front of the camera, you need special lighting, you can't just use flash, you need continuous lighting. It's more of a production to shoot a video than it is photos. So the DSLR was just to keep my skills sharp, and that's where I realized, man, here I have all the control. Here I get to make the decisions. Here I get to learn a little bit of everything. And once again, I found that I had almost the same passion for photography as I did for shooting videos, like with my friends when I was in high school. And I thought, this is something that I would control my own destiny. Like, I would control if I would open up a business, how it's ran, how I shoot, how I do things. All of that would be up to me. And that's when I decided, I guess this is what I gotta do. But that would require me to have failed as a cinematographer. And that was hard. That was a hard moment for me to, I was worried. Now my mom has always been incredibly supportive. She's definitely the most supportive person in my entire life that I've ever met or haven't met. You know what I mean? Like the most supportive person I've ever heard of in my entire life. So, but I was still scared to go to her and be like, hey mom, you know what? This is what I'm thinking of doing. And just because I know she knows how much time and effort I put in to being a cinematographer, all these years of just like lusting after it, thinking about it, like watching movies, taking notes and all this stuff, and then finally making that decision to go. She, like, sure enough, she was welcoming with like open arms, like, you go for it, like, you do this. If that's what it is that you want to do, then you do it, which was great. But still, there's a mental hurdle that you have to overcome, that you have failed at something, and that's hard. So when I first got into photography, I know that doesn't have much to do with photography, so I'll move on here. When I first got into photography, I thought, you know what kind of photography do I want to do? At first it's like, man, I'll shoot anything that pays me. Like, yeah, of course. Like, if they have money, I have a camera, like, I got the skills, even exchange, done. Like, that's going to be great. And then very quickly I realized this is not, there's a lot of people that I don't like working with, a lot of gigs that I don't like doing. This is not what I want to do. So I sat down and I thought, like, well, what are my strengths? Okay, my strengths are, well, I'm an introvert, so I definitely don't like to be in large crowds of people. Okay, so I could do portraits. Portraits are good, okay? I love kids. I love hanging out with kids. Kids are fun. They're, like, energetic. They have, like, no filter. They're a blast to be around. What if I was a family photographer, right? I shot portraits of families and their kids. That could be a really cool idea, and it would play to my strengths. Okay, that's what it is that I'm going to do. I'm going to go full bore at that. And once I started doing that, again, almost the exact same story. I got there, and sure, there was a few moments that was like, hey, this is fun, this turned out great, this is good. But posing like multiple people, including tiny people who are very rambunctious, like children, proved a lot more difficult than what I thought that it might be. And I'm not saying that made me not want to be a family portrait photographer anymore, but there's something about it. Like, when I'm around a kid, it's fine, right? We can play, we can have a good time. But the second that I put that camera in front of my face, I just lose some sort of connection with them, and they just look at me with like this weird kind of face. Like, I don't know about this guy. I'm not going to trust him fully. And when they don't trust me fully, I can't get the photos that I've promise to deliver to a family, and that's what made it really hard. And I tried that for quite a while, and ultimately it didn't work. So I had remembered that I had been to weddings before, right? It's kind of a weird segue. It's not that I forgot, but remembering, because then I started thinking about, okay, well, if this isn't going to work out, like if I can't make that connection, well, what other areas of photography can I do? And naturally, I just thought, well, what about wedding photography? Even though, as an introvert, I said, like, okay, I don't want to be around large crowds of people. I kind of like my own space, things like that. Weddings just didn't seem like it was going to be a good idea. But honestly, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I loved it, in fact. There's something about being at a wedding where as a photographer, you have a lot of eyes on you. At least you think that you have a lot of eyes on you, right? Before the wedding, if you do it right, or if you're able to, you can meet with the couple, you can talk with them, you can figure out what it is that they love to do. Maybe you can even have an engagement session with them and then get a better idea of how they operate together and how you can better operate with them. Okay? And you get a good idea of their personality. But on the wedding day, you don't know everybody else. And everybody else is their friends and family. It's their close friends and family. So now here you are, a stranger on their wedding day, and you don't know anybody else. So you kind of feel like, I can't just kind of start a conversation with this person, at least me as an introvert. Like, I don't really want to start like a conversation with this person. I don't really know who they are. I don't know what they're into. Like, I'm kind of here to do a job. So you just the camera lets you hide behind a lens. Okay. And I've heard this before from like documentary photographers who like are like in the middle of war and they see horrible things. Like photographers who say that they throw up at the sight of blood are able to photograph just genocides. I mean, horrible things. And what they say is that there's this barrier between the camera and yourself, which makes it a whole lot easier to document. And I have found the exact same thing, or at least the exact same experience when I'm shooting weddings, is that even though I'm more comfortable around people that I know in smaller groups, being at a wedding, as long as I have that camera in front of my face, I can put all of that aside. And I can focus on the job at hand because I know the couple and I'm going to do my best to get good work for them. I hope that makes sense. So even though I had failed at being a cinematographer, I had failed at being a family and family portrait photographer, I found something that I loved in weddings, which was unlike me. It didn't seem like it was going to be a good fit at all, and yet it was. But it still took me knowing what it was that I didn't want to do to find what it is that I love. And the only way that I could find that is by failing. Not only that, I have failed on, every day I have some sort of failure, right? I have failed at engagement sessions. I have failed at a few weddings that I've shot. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the photos were bad, even though I've taken some really bad photos. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, I caused a scene at a wedding or an engagement session. I can't really think of a time where I've done anything like that. But, maybe it's just the client communications afterwards. Right? So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I had booked a wedding, and that couple, before I had shot their wedding, referred their friends who were also engaged to me. And their friends booked me. I met with them. We had a great conversation. I thought that we got along great. We went to go shoot their engagement photos. They hated them. They hated their engagement photos. And I really thought, that day, I remember saying to my assistant at the time, I remember saying to him, man, we knocked that engagement session out of the park. That was awesome. And here it is, a few weeks later, they have their photos and they hate them. And obviously this was hard because it's like, I've created something for you to have. You have paid me. You trust me. You've paid me all this money, and here I have, you paid me this money to create something for you, something memorable that you could share with your friends, something that you can remember this moment by, and you don't like it. And it hurt me at first, right? It was like, oh, how could you not like this? Like, what's not to like about these photos? And I got really defensive internally, of course. And then I thought to myself, like, okay, I'm not even going to answer this email for like 24 hours because I have to think about this. And what I had thought of is like, well, I got to figure out why. Like, why don't they like their photos? Because that's ultimately what's most important here. I now need to figure out if we're still going to be a good fit for me to shoot their wedding. And once I asked them, it turns out that they just wanted more photos of themselves looking at the camera instead of each other. They wanted more camera-aware photos, and that makes total sense. Like, cool. You know what? I can totally get that for you. I can absolutely do that for you at your wedding. Sounds great. And you know what? The wedding turned out wonderful. They left me an incredible review for my business, and everything worked out great. But what it taught me was that I had failed them. I had failed to educate them on how I work and what it is that I deliver. Okay, so they were assuming that they were getting something, and they did not get it because I had not educated them in the fact that, you know what? I personally don't think that a lot of people like camera-aware photos, like maybe one or two, but the majority of the reason why people hire me to shoot their wedding is that they want a relaxed, enjoyable experience, and me as a photographer, I can catch more candid shots than posed shots that still show them having a good time and just having a blast on their wedding day, right? And I had failed to educate them on how I work for an engagement session. And that's good. Like, I'm really glad that happened. Because now, before every engagement session, I make sure that I send out an email saying, hey, this is how engagement sessions work with me. Or I'll tell them at our initial meeting, if they expressed interest in an engagement session, I'll tell them exactly how it works. I'll show them full galleries of other couples of their engagement sessions. And if it's at the same place where this couple wants to have their engagement session, I show them a gallery from that location, right? So that they can get an idea of putting themselves in those photos so that they can figure out like, oh, you know what? We're going to want to make sure that we get a few more like parent pleaser shots where we're both looking at the camera. And that is totally fine because what that is doing is that I had to go through a moment of horror, right? Of thinking that these people hate my work and what it is that I'm doing for them. And in return, I got something so much better. Now, I have built more trust with my clients by sending them this information, by showing them these photos, possibly of a location where we're going for them, and opening up the door to ask for any sort of feedback, just in case they want more silhouettes or posed photos in front of the camera, right? So it took me failing at an area of my expertise in photography to be better as a photographer. I think that is so important. The point is that you have to make mistakes. I take that back. You don't have to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, right? You're just going to. No matter what it is that you do. Even if you do everything perfect. This is going to sound stupid, but you're still going to make mistakes. Okay, I know that doesn't make sense, but just trust me. You're still going to make mistakes. So what I wanted to do with this podcast, the reason why I started it, is that I want to talk to other photographers because sometimes this is kind of a lonely gig, right? I want to talk to other photographers and find out not only how they got to where they are, because I think that that's important, because I love to hear different aspects. I want to hear people's different opinions and their views, and then leave it up to me to decide what I think is right for me and my business to do. But to do that, I have to interview multiple photographers, right? I try to do this every single week, and I bring you into the conversation, and I try to figure out how it is that they got to where they are, and what mistakes they made along the way to help me learn quicker. That's why I ask questions like, if you could do it all again, what would you tell yourself? Like, these are big picture things, right? Obviously, if somebody were to ask me like, hey Raymond, if you had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have been like, oh, well, I just would have shot more camera aware photos at this one engagement session. I mean, there would be big things. In fact, I guess I'll just share one right now. I think if I had to go back again and tell myself one thing, it would really be to have patience and to shoot for yourself and to not worry about what the client thinks, right? No, I take that back. You do have to worry about what the client thinks. What I mean is, don't try to please every potential client, because you have to photography still has to be enjoyable for you. And the second that it turns into a job is when it just loses all of its magic. So you have to shoot what it is that you want to shoot. And then the families, the couples, the clients, the buyers who like what you shoot will come to you every single time. And that's going to bring people who love your work, and it's going to let you continue to make work that you love. Like, it's a great relationship, right? So that's definitely what I would share. So when I'm at a wedding, right? Or we'll take that engagement session again as an example. So we reshot the engagement photos, and I took more camera-aware photos. And that's great, because that's what it was that they wanted. That's what was going to take them to be pleased with their photos, and I enjoyed doing it again. I enjoyed spending more time with them. But did I show those photos on my website? Absolutely not. Why? Because I don't want couples to think like, oh, this guy only does post photos where we're all looking at the camera and looking kind of stiff. I don't want people to think that. So will I take those photos? Yes. Will I show those photos? No. But that's something that I've learned not only through my own experience, but through listening to the other photographers who I interview on the podcast. And I really hope that you learn these things as well, okay? Maybe it's not as clear at first. Maybe you listen to a podcast and you think, I'm not sure that really applies to me, or I don't see how this landscape photographer applies to my portrait work. But I guarantee that if you really stick with photography, and you're in it for a few years, and you keep going, you work your hardest, you really do stuff that you love, you're going to run into a moment where you think, wow, I never thought that I would be in this situation. And now I'm remembering back to that one landscape photographer's podcast and how he said X and how it applies to this situation right now. That's why I think the internet is so great. It's like a hive mind. You can bring so many different people's opinions together, and you can decide for your own what's going to work for you. But if that's not who you are, and that's not why, I take that back. If you're listening to this podcast, that's exactly who you are. But maybe you like to learn. Maybe you're more hands-on and you like to learn things, quote unquote, the hard way. Then just be prepared. And I'm not saying that that's bad, because some people learn better that way, and that's more than fine. But the only advice that I have for you is to be prepared, because you're going to fail. And what you need to know is not to take it hard. You need to take everything that you do. You have to learn from it. And you have to learn twice as much from the mistakes that you make. And that's it. I want you to get out. I want you to shoot. Just shoot as much as you can. Just shoot everything that you can. Shoot people who, you don't even like, right? Shoot things that you think are boring. Go to it's almost, the holidays. They have that puppy, championship or whatever. Photograph dogs. Although I can't really think of anybody who hates dogs, so that's a weird example. My point is that you need to try everything, and you need to fail. You need to fail. It's going to humble you, and you are going to learn so much from every single one of your failures, as long as you know that you're working towards your end goal, even if you don't know what that is yet. When I was in film school and I was loving every minute of it, I didn't know that I was going to be a wedding photographer one day. When I had made that decision to, I don't want to say give up on cinematography, but when I had made that decision to stop pursuing full-time film jobs, I didn't know where it was going to lead me. But all that I could feel at the time was that I had given up, was that I had lost my passion, was that I wasn't doing something correctly. And that's why I wasn't working, right? I didn't know that I was going to end up here. And here, I'm happy. I'm happy right now. But you know what? Maybe I won't be happy 5 years from now. And I'm going to have to keep working towards making failures. And that's why I'm always trying new things. Right now, I'm really getting into like little family slideshows with photos and videos because I love to create, but the post-processing time is just, it's a time suck. That's the part that I hate so much. So if I can kind of automate that, even if I don't have all the control and the flexibility as I would if I made it myself, if I give up some of that control, but I can still produce something that I can show my family years from now, well, maybe I'm okay with that. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to try. Try. So homework for the week. Woo! This week, wait, is it this week? Is it next week? If you guys are listening to this live, the day that it comes out, or the week that it comes out, is Thanksgiving, okay? Here's the thing. You guys might want to bring every piece of gear that you have over to the family's house, right? You're going to want to photograph everything from every angle. I'm going to give you constraint. I want you to show up with one camera and one lens, right? Make it really hard for yourself, because that's how it is that you're going to grow, okay? And maybe you'll learn something new. Maybe just bring a GoPro, okay? I don't know. Just try it. Just try it. You can get really interesting perspectives with a camera that wide, right? With a lens that wide, right? Get really close to the turkey. See if you can play with background stuff. Or, bring the DSLR. Like if you got to get like really good photos, like if you're known for that, then bring it. But just bring one lens. Maybe bring a prime lens. Don't even bring a zoom lens. Just try one camera, one lens, and just get creative with how you're going to get your shots, okay? Because that not only is going to free you up creatively and like with your time, like, hey, now I have more time, I can interact with my friends and family instead of, where's my 24-70, I need to go get this, I bounce some flash over here. Instead of worrying about any of that, you can spend more time with your family, and who knows, maybe you're going to get a photo that you didn't think you would have liked with that camera and lens combo, and that's going to change the way that you shoot in the future. So that's all that I have for today. There's no intro, there's no plugs, there's nothing like that. I want you guys to have a great time. Again, it's Thanksgiving this week. I seriously want you guys to enjoy Thanksgiving as much as humanly possible, because photography is nothing if you don't enjoy it. And, photography helps you enjoy life. Family and friends are just as important. So really spend time with them. Enjoy yourselves. I know my wife and I are going to a Friendsgiving before her family's Thanksgiving, so I'm just going to be stuffed full of turkey and cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Definitely my second favorite holiday of the year behind the 4th of July. So that's it. I will see you guys next week. We have a big episode. You know what? Since I don't have an outro, I'm going to give you guys a hint on next week's episode. It's a big one, and it's from a photographer who you've probably heard of. Like, it's almost a guarantee. He runs a how do I say this? I guess you could say a 6-figure photography studio and also a podcast. So he shares a ton of information, and you guys are absolutely going to love it. But until then, that's it. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great Thanksgiving. Be safe. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Later.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.